Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on lookup functions in Excel. I've done 3 sound checks in the last half an hour, so I'm fairly confident that everybody can hear me okay, and hopefully you're seeing a holding slide on the screen now that just says lookup functions in Excel. I have to apologise first of all about my voice. I've unfortunately been suffering from a cold for the last few days, so if I sound a bit croaky, that's the reason why. I've been drinking hot lemon all morning, and hopefully I'll be able to get through this webinar without too many problems. So I do apologise if my voice sounds a little bit strange and a bit bunged up. I am trying my best for you. So today we're going to look at lookup functions in Excel, and this is probably one of my favourite webinars to run. I love lookup functions, and if you know anything about functions in Excel, you'll know that lookup functions are probably one of the most important functions to learn when you're using Excel. And some people do find them a little bit complicated, and I'm one of those people. When I first started learning them, I did find them quite difficult to get my head around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you all the way back to basics, and we're going to start with some fairly simple examples so that you get to understand the structure of a lookup function and how you can utilize them in the work that you do. And then we'll build up slowly throughout the session. We'll end with something which is a little bit more complex, and something which you may want to go and review again after this webinar. Now, as always, the most popular question I get is this webinar going to be recorded? Yes, it is. It's being recorded now. And if you are attending this webinar, or if you've registered for this webinar, then you will receive a copy of that recording along with the practice file that I'm using 48 hours after this webinar ends. So in a couple of days, and it does take us a couple of days to get it all uploaded to YouTube, because YouTube is extremely slow when uploading videos. So that is why. So hopefully that answers your question. All right, let's move along and look at today's agenda. Actually, I'll introduce myself first of all, because I know we do have a lot of regulars on, but we always do have a few new people as well. So for those of you who are new to our webinars, my name's Deborah Ashby, and I am the IT trainer and subject matter expert here at Filtered and Excel with Business. And I basically look after all of our Microsoft content. So I've been a trainer for a very long time, both in the classroom and online. And that's basically my job. I write training courses and I run webinars like this and in-person training for all of our customers and delegates. So that's me. Hopefully that qualifies me to run the session today. And as I said, we're going to run through lookup functions, and this is sort of our brief agenda that we're going to go through. So we're going to just start out by explaining a little bit about what are lookup functions. I am aware that there might be some people on today who have never used them, don't really understand what they are, so we'll take a look at that first of all. We'll then take a look at how you find lookup functions in Excel. So where are they located? It's not immediately obvious when you look at the ribbons in Excel where you'll find them, so we'll take a look at that. And then we'll jump into a practical example. So I'm going to show you how to use VLOOKUP, which is the vertical lookup, and also HLOOKUP, which is horizontal lookup. There's also a couple of different sort of variables when it comes to using VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, and that is the exact and approximate match variable. So I'll explain to you what that is and the different results you get with both of those. And we'll then move on to a different kind of lookup, and that is using the index and match commands together. Again, another way of looking up information, a really powerful way as well. And as we go through that, I'm going to show you things like data validation as well, which is always a handy little thing to know. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a much better idea of how you can utilize lookup functions in your daily work. All right, so let's, excuse me. Let's take a look at that first question. So what are lookup functions and why are they useful? Well, lookup functions are designed to work with data that is organized into columns. So if you think of a standard spreadsheet, most of the data that you'll be dealing with is organized into columns. You might have header rows at the top, but in general, that's the best format for lookup functions. And what a lookup function does is it finds the value in one column and returns the corresponding value from another column. Now that might not mean much to you at the moment, so what I'm going to show you is just a very quick screenshot to hopefully illustrate that a little bit better. And you can see what kind of music I like from this list here. I do like a bit of heavy metal. Does anybody else? I'm going to throw that question out. What's your favorite type of music? I'm very interested to learn. You can type it into the chat panel if you like. Am I the only one who likes heavy metal? I know that's a bit odd for a girl. Classical, wow, rock and roll, Led Zepp, yes, Kim, I'm with you there. Classic rock from the 70s. Disco, wow, that's a new one. Jazz, oh, we've got a whole wide range of things on there. Red Hot Chili Peppers, is that all you like? Wonderful, all right. So this example that I have at the top here, we have two tables. So the first table is just listing the band, the album, and the sales. And you can see we have a record label column that's currently empty. And the idea here is I want to populate that record label column. And I have another little table underneath. Now, I've got it underneath in this example. This second table might be on a completely different spreadsheet, and that's absolutely fine. But you can see here I have a table that has the album and the record label. So the second table contains the information that I'm looking for. It's the information that I want to populate in this column in the first table. So what I need to do is I can use a lookup function here to do that for me. Now, the first thing that's very important is that you must have, if my screen will move on, there we go, a piece of information that's common to both tables. And you can see here, the album name is common to both tables. So what I can essentially do with a lookup is I can say, look up the album name in this second table and return the record label. So it's looking up information in the second table using a piece of information that's common between the two. And that's basically what a lookup function does, okay? So that's kind of briefly an overview of what the lookup function does. Let's look at an actual practical example now. So I'm going to come out of PowerPoint and switch back across to Excel. All right, now this might look a little bit complicated first of all, so let me just explain to you what we're looking at. So on this page or on this worksheet, we have two tables. I have this table here, which runs all the way down. And then I have a second table just over here, which again runs all the way down. This information just here is just me listing out what the arguments are. So we'll come to that in a moment, but the actual data that we want to use is between this table and this one down here. Now this first table is just basically a list of products for, looks like some kind of furniture store. And you can see in column A, we have a list of those different products. We have some information about the size in column B. We have the color, price, how many are in stock, how many have been sold, and the revenue that's been generated. And then we have two columns here, department and category, which currently are not completed. And those are the columns that we want to complete using a lookup function. Now, where am I going to get this information from? Well, this table down here has the product information. It also has the department and the category. Now, I've put these both on the same worksheet just for ease of use so you can see what's going on. But as I said before, this secondary table might be on a completely different worksheet. It might even be in a completely different workbook, and it doesn't matter. The process is the same, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to use the piece of common information between these two tables to return the department and category. Now, looking at that, what is the common information in between these two tables? Type it into the chat if you know. What piece of information is common between those two tables? Does anybody know? Product, yes, excellent. Everyone's got that correct. Lovely. So yes, the product is the piece of common information. So that's what I'm going to use to do my VLOOKUP. And we're going to do it a different way each time, so you can see both of the ways that you can do it. The first way is we're going to use the functions dialog box. People sometimes find this a little bit easier when they're first learning functions as opposed to just typing it directly into the cell. So where do I find my lookup functions? Well, up on the formulas ribbon, we have a function library and we have all of our different categories down here. And we have one called lookup and reference. And you'll see as you look down here, right to the bottom, we have VLOOKUP. Okay, now the difference between VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP is just the way that your data is structured. So VLOOKUP means vertical lookup, and that means that I have my headings essentially in columns, so I'm running vertically down the rows. You'll see in a moment an example where we do an HLOOKUP, and you'll see that the column headings are actually in the rows, so the data runs across the page. That's the only difference between the two. So I have my lookup functions underneath here. Alternatively, if I didn't know they were in there, I could go to my function library, and I like to access that just by clicking on this small FX to the left of the formula bar. And I could type in here that I want to do a lookup and click go, and it will give me all of my options for lookup. And you can see there, one we have is VLOOKUP. So I'm going to click OK. And it gives me this functions dialog box, and it gives me all of the different variables that I need to fill in. So the first one here is lookup value. What am I looking up? Now, lookup value is that piece of information that's common between these two tables, okay? And we established that that is the product. So I'm going to select A6, okay? Because we're doing this first one here. The next thing is the table array. So I need to tell Excel, okay, where am I looking up this information? So my table array is going to be this table down here, okay? Now there's a couple of different ways that you can select this table. I could go in and just highlight the entire table in here and put the references in. Now to me, that's not the easiest way to do it, okay? So I'm just going to cancel this for a moment. And I'm going to come down to this table, and I'm going to name this table. It's a lot easier in the long run if you name things. So I'm going to come into here, and I'm going to select that entire table by pressing Control A. And I'm going to give this data range or this table a name. And I'm going to go over to my little name box, which is all the way over on the left-hand side where it currently says K20. And I'm going to click in there, and I'm going to call this table product. Let's call it product underscore list, and press enter. So I've now named that range of cells. So I no longer have to select the cell references. I can just use the name in my VLOOKUP. So let's go back to our function library, select our VLOOKUP, and do it again. So my lookup value is the product. My table array, I can now use the name of my table. So I can start to type in product underscore list. Also, another little trick is if you press the F3 key on your keyboard, if you've named a range, it will bring up all of those named ranges. I'll see if I can do it on a webinar. Sometimes it doesn't let me. Let me have a go. Yep, there we go. So if I press F3, you can see there it's brought up any named ranges that I have. So I can select product list. That's my table array. It's then saying to me, okay, I'm looking in the product list table. Which column do you want me to return? Now we're looking up the department, okay? So if I look down in this table, I've got product, department, and category. And the way Excel knows which column you want is it basically numbers them from left to right. So product would be column 1, department column 2, category column 3. So the column I want is the department. So I'm going to say that this is column 2. That's the column I want you to pull back. And then the range lookup. Now, if you look underneath here, it says, do you want to find the closest match or an exact? So do you want to find a closest match or the exact match? So do I want to say I'm exactly looking up the word bamboo armchair, which is this first one here, in this table? Yes, I do. I want it to exactly match in this table. So with that, I would type in false. You have an argument of true or false there. We're going to do the true argument in a moment, but false is for an exact match. So those are your arguments. And if we click on OK, you can see there, it gives me the answer of furniture. And I can then use my autofill handle to double click to copy that all the way down. Okay, now if I hadn't have used, and if we look at our formula again, product list, if I hadn't have used that range, if I just selected the range when I was doing this, and then try to copy down, I would need to remember that I would have to make that range absolute. So I'd have to put those dollar signs in front, because remember, if you copy down, Excel will move all those formulas down one. So it wouldn't work if you don't make them absolute. That's one of the reasons why I like to use a name, because it means you can just copy it straight down. Let's do it again. The category, okay? I'm going to do it a slightly different way. I'm going to just do it by typing into the cell this time. So we're going to say equals VLOOKUP, open bracket. And again, you can see the arguments underneath. So lookup value. Our lookup value is going to be the same. So it's going to be A6, comma. Where am I looking it up? I'm looking it up in that second table, which we named product list. And you'll see as I start to type it in, I get my little product list table, so I can select it, comma. Which column do I want it to pull back? So this is where this example differs from the previous one. This time we're looking for the category. So remember, the columns are numbered from left to right, 1, 2, 3. So I want to say pull back column 3, comma. And am I doing the approximate match or an exact match? I'm doing an exact match. So I can type in false. Also remember here, if there's a true or false argument, you can replace true or false with 0 or 1. So 0 is false, 1 is true. So either will work. I can type in false, or I could type in 0. Close the bracket. And there we go. And once again, I can double click to copy that all the way down. All right. A little bit difficult to get your head around if this is the first time that you're seeing it. With VLOOKUPs, it's all about practice. Are you still with me? How does that sit so far with everyone? Someone's put, do both data sets need to be in a table? No, they don't. This actually isn't in a table down here. I know I say table, but if you click down here, I don't actually have this in a table. If I did, you would see the table tools ribbon at the top here. So I don't actually have it in a table. So you don't have to have it in a table. You can just name the range. Everyone's loving that, the tip about the table name. See, sometimes it's the smallest things which can prove to be the most valuable to people. Wonderful. All right, let's move on to another example. We're going to carry on doing a few examples just so you get the hang of this. All right, next one. This is a slightly different example. So here, again, we have just something very simple. We have some part numbers, and I want to get the description and the unit price for these part numbers. And where do I have this information? Well, I have it in a separate worksheet this time. So if I go to catalog, this is my catalog of part numbers. In column A, we have the description and we have the price. So I want to pull back the description and the price into this table just here. So what is my common piece of information? This should be fairly straightforward and simple. What do we think it is, people? Yes, part number, lovely. Wonderful. So part number is our common piece of information. I'm going to use this part number. I'm going to look it up in this table, and I'm going to pull back the description and the price. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to name my table again. I keep saying table. This isn't actually a table. It's just an easier way to refer to it. But I'm going to name my data range, shall we say. So I'm going to click in my data range, Control A to highlight. And I'm going to give it a name in this name box. I'm going to call it parts _ catalog. And remember to enter. If you don't hit enter, it doesn't seem to set. And also another word about this naming things in here, you can't have any spaces, which is why I've separated these two words with an underscore, okay? You could have it all as one word, but you can't have a space in there. So we've named this data range parts catalog. Let's go back to here and let's do our VLOOKUP again. Equals VLOOKUP, open bracket. Our lookup value is the part number, B4, comma. Where are we looking it up? Well, we're looking it up in our parts catalog that we just named. So again, if I start to type parts, you'll see it brings up the name of that table. Comma, column index number. Now, on the catalogue page, the description was in column 2. So we're pulling back column 2. And do I want to do an approximate or an exact match? I want it to exactly match the part number in the parts catalogue table. So we're doing an exact match, which the argument is false or 0. And there we go. And I can copy that down. And you'll see that here we have an NA. Now we're going to deal with that NA in a moment after we've completed the unit price. So again, we're going to do a VLOOKUP. Let's use the function, insert function box for this one. And let's just go back to the catalogue very quickly and just check. So this is what we're looking up this time. We want the unit price. So that's going to be column 3. We're still going to use the part number. So let's go back and click on our FX to insert function and go to VLOOKUP. This is pretty much exactly the same. So lookup value, part number, table array. Now again, I can press F3 and I've got both of those ranges that I've named. So I'm looking it up in the parts catalogue. Column index number, I want to return the unit price this time. And we established that was column 3. And again, do I want to do an exact or an approximate match? I want it to exactly match that part number, so false. And there we go. And I can copy down like so. All right, so fairly straightforward. Now, as I said, you can see here, I've got something that says NA. So to me, that says that this part number hasn't been found in this catalogue. It doesn't exist. Now, what I could do is just a little added extra is I don't particularly like that NA in there. I might want to replace that with something else. So I'm going to go back to my VLOOKUP formula just here. And there is something you can add in to deal with these kinds of error messages, just to make them a little bit more meaningful. So what I'm going to do on the front of this, there is a function called if NA. What that basically means is if you come across something that says NA, do this. So it's going to do what's in the brackets first of all. So it's going to run the VLOOKUP. Now, if it doesn't find the part number, this if NA will come into play. Okay, so on the end here, I'm going to do comma, and you can see the argument value if it finds NA. So if it finds NA, I want it to say part not found. And if you're typing text into a formula, you always need to put it in quote marks, like so. All right, so if I press enter, you won't see it take effect until I copy it down, double click, and you can see now that's a little bit more meaningful, part not found, okay? I might want to do the same thing over here for this one. Now, this if NA only copes with when it has an NA in here. And NA isn't the only error that you can get in Excel. It might be that you have a ref error or a value error or something like that. And if we were to use the if NA function and there was a ref error in here, it wouldn't change it, okay, because it's only looking for NA, that particular function. There is another function you can use which picks up any error, and that is the if error command. So we'll do that for this one instead. We'll say if error, and then on the end here, I'm going to say, what should we say for this one? I'm just going to put actually a value of 0, like so. And then when I copy down, you'll see that if the part's not found, it's going to give a value of 0. Okay, so that's just a little bit of error checking that you can add in to your lookup functions. Is that making sense to everybody so far? As I said, it's a pretty good idea to go through this at your own pace afterwards. Yeah, lovely, great, okay. I can see there's lots of questions. I am going to leave some time for questions at the end. It's just a little bit of hard for me to answer them as we're going through. Wonderful. Okay, seems like we're all still on the same page, always good. Oh, sorry. Okay, moving across to our next example. Now, so far, we've been dealing with VLOOKUP with that false argument on the end. And if you remember, there's a true or a false argument you can use. And false is when you're doing an exact match, when you want to look up exactly the part number or exactly that word in the other table. This example is slightly different. This is where you would use that true argument on the end, which does an approximate match. So let's take a look at what we've got on this page so that you can understand. So what we have here are some income tax brackets. So we have a lower end, a high end, and you can see the range of that income tax bracket, and then the tax rate for that particular range. Now what I want to do is underneath we have a small table here, and I want to be able to look up in this table this salary, 55,000, and have it pull back the tax rate. Now why are we doing an approximate match? Well, if we look at 55,000, can you see exactly 55,000 in here? No, you can't. If we were doing a VLOOKUP and we put false on the end, it's going to look for exactly 55,000 in this table, which we don't have. 55,000 falls somewhere between this range here. Okay, so this is where we would use an approximate match. So the VLOOKUP is pretty much exactly the same apart from that last argument, okay? So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to name my little table here. So I'm going to Control A, oops, actually, let me highlight, it's a bit easier. And I'm going to call this table tax underscore brackets. And I'm going to come down here and we're going to do our VLOOKUP. So equals VLOOKUP. Our lookup value is still this, okay, comma. Our table array is our tax bracket table, so I can start to type in tax, and there it is, comma, column index number. Now I'm looking for the marginal tax rate, so I want it to pull back the value that's in here. So we're going to count from the left, 1, 2, 3, 4. I want you to pull back column 4, comma. Now this time we're doing an approximate match, so I can type true in here. Alternatively, I could type in 1. All right, and enter. And there we go. Let's just double check that. So 55,000 falls in between here. And there we go. Marginal tax rate is 25%. And again, I can copy that down by dragging or double clicking. Does that make sense, the difference between the two? One, you're doing an exact match. One, you're doing an approximate. Is everybody happy with that so far? I saw one person put confused. I know it can be confusing if this is the first time that you're seeing it. As I said, when you get the recording, I would definitely go through this slow. I'm going to send you these spreadsheets as well, so you can go through the webinar and you can do it slowly, and hopefully it will make a little bit more sense to you as you're going through. Sorry, excuse me. Lovely. All right, let's move on to another example. This is HLOOKUP. Now, we've been concentrating mainly on VLOOKUP up until this stage, and that is looking at things running vertically down the page. Excuse me, I need to cough. I'm just going to go on mute. Hang on. Oh, I'm so sorry. All right, so HLOOKUP. This is when we're running vertically across the page. So you can see here, we've got the same table that we had in our first example. So we have these pieces of furniture, but we have our column headings running down in the rows as opposed to in the columns. Now, when the information is running horizontally across the page, this is when we would do an HLOOKUP, because H stands for horizontal. So what we're going to do here is we're going to complete the department and the category. So what we've got in rows 9 and 10, we want to complete these two by doing an HLOOKUP in this table down here. So you can see here we have the product, we have the department, and we have the category. So I'm going to use exactly the same method. I'm going to highlight this table, And a quick way of doing that, Control Shift right arrow will highlight the whole data set. And I'm going to call this one furniture. Call it furniture underscore sales. And now we can do our HLOOKUP. So it's pretty much exactly the same. HLOOKUP, and then we want to do our lookup value, which is the bamboo armchair, same as before. Table array, furniture sales, comma. This time it's asking for a row index number as opposed to a column because we're going across the page. So we're looking for the department. So the row that we want, again, we count down 1, 2, 3. So department is 2. Are we doing an approximate or an exact match? We're doing an exact match. So false is our argument. And there we go. So it works pretty much the same way, and I can drag that across. Let's do it one more time, this time for category. HLOOKUP, bamboo armchair, B2, a table array, furniture sales. Our row index number this time is 3. And there we go. Hopefully you can see the difference there between VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. Does anybody have any questions about that so far? I apologize for my voice, it's getting worse. But furniture is not a department. Yvonne, I'm sorry. I know, I grabbed this data off the internet, so I guess somebody thinks furniture is a department. Someone's put HLOOKUP is somewhat confusing. I can understand why you would think that. It's just you're doing the same thing, but you're just running across the page as opposed to down. Okay, so it's a different format. So depending on how you have your data set out. So with HLOOKUP, it's your column headings running down in the rows. Okay, with VLOOKUP, your column headings would be running down. If I just go back to the same example, we've got our column headings down here. That's the difference. Okay, all right, let's move on to our last example. Okay, so our final example, now this one is a little bit more complicated, and this is using index and match, which again are 2 lookup functions, and they are 2 separate functions that you can use, but they work best when combined together, or they're most powerful when combined together. Now, why would you use index match over VLOOKUP? Well, VLOOKUP does have some limitations, okay? So with VLOOKUP, if we just jump back to here, VLOOKUP can only look one way in a table. So when we're doing, or when we were completing this department column, we were looking up in this table using the product ID, and we were looking up department. With a VLOOKUP, when you're looking something up, it always has to be to the right of the lookup value. So in this case, this was fine because I was looking up product and I wanted it to return department, which is to the right. I couldn't say use the category and look backwards this way. That's not going to work. So VLOOKUP can only look from left to right in a table, okay? If you want to look up something which is maybe to the left, then that is when you would use index and match. And that's what we're going to look at now. And if you're not used to them, this is probably going to seem quite complicated, but I did want to add it in because it's such a popular function for people to use. All right, so what we have here, and I just bear with me one second. I can just see I need to delete some work I was doing earlier. Lovely. All right. So what we have here is we have a table, and this is for mobile applications. So these should look fairly familiar to some of you if you have a mobile phone. We've got some apps, and we have the division that those apps belong to. So you can see things like Instagram, Facebook both belong to social media. We have revenue that those apps have generated, and we have profit. Now what I want to do is over here, I want to be able to look up an app, and I want it to return the division, the profit, and the revenue. Okay. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I want to be able to select an app from up here. I'm just going to delete Bejeweled out of there. So what I want is a list of my apps which I can select from a drop-down menu so that I can toggle between the different apps and see the information for each app. So the first thing I'm going to do is create what we call a data validation list. All right, and this is a super useful thing to know in Excel. I find it really useful. So what I want to do is get this list of apps into a list over here, which I can then just select. So I'm going to click in my cell, H5. I'm going to go up to the data ribbon and across to data validation. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, in this little allow drop down, I'm going to select list. And it asks me, where is my list source? Well, I want all of the apps to be in a list. And you can see now I get this little drop down where I can go in and I can select any of the apps. And that's really useful. You can do that with anything. Anything you have in a list, you can basically make it into a little toggle list just by using that data validation option. So now I've got that and I can toggle between my different apps. I want it to be able to pull back the division, the profit, and the revenue for each app I have selected in here. So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to use index and match, but first of all, I want to show you how they work separately because they are two separate functions, okay? We're going to do them separately and then we're going to combine them together. So the first one we're going to look at is index. So let's see what index does. Now, first of all, I want to find the division of the current selected app, which is Bejeweled, from this table. So I can do a quick visual check because our table is very small. I can see Bejeweled, the division is game. So that's what I want it to return in here. So let's see what happens when we use index. Now with index, the first argument there, array, you need to select what you're looking up essentially. So I'm looking up the division. So my array is going to be everything in the division. Comma. Now it's asking me for a row number. Now I'm looking for the app Bejeweled. So I find Bejeweled in my table and I can see that's 1, 2, 3, 4 rows down. So my row number is 4. I'm going to close my bracket. What does that give us? It gives me the answer I want. It gives me game. Now, that's all well and good, but this isn't particularly great. I've had to count down the number of rows. I've had to tell Excel Bejeweled is the 4th one in this apps list, which is fine if you have a small data set like I have. But imagine if you have a data set that has hundreds or even thousands of rows. You really don't want to waste your time counting down and looking for that particular thing. What we want to do is be able to automate this part. We want to automate the finding of this row number, okay? And then we can feed that into the index. So with that in mind, let's look at match. Let's see what match does. I'm going to delete this out. I'm going to say equals match. Now match is asking me for a lookup value. So what am I looking up? I want to find the information for Bejeweled. So I'm looking up H5. Where am I looking it up? Well, Bejeweled is an app, so I'm looking it up in the apps list. And this is kind of similar to VLOOKUP in a way. It's saying, do you want to do an exact match or less than, greater than? I want it to do an exact match. I want it to find exactly Bejeweled in the array that I've got selected. So I want to say 0 for exact match. And let's see what this gives us. Ooh, it gives me the position in this list, it gives me the row number. Now this is exactly what we wanted to automate in our original index. So that's why we combined the two. Let's look at it combined. Equals index. So remember, the first argument is array. So what are we looking up here? We want to find the division. So I'm going to select the division. The next part was the row number. Now, when we originally did the index, we counted down the number of rows and entered it in. That's the part we automated by that match command. So instead of typing in a row number, I'm going to get Excel to find it using that match command. On the match command, we used the lookup value, H5. We're looking up the app in the list of apps. And we're doing an exact match, 0. And I need to close off 2 parentheses because I've opened 2 parentheses. Let's see what happens now. There we go, I get game. Now let's just do a visual check. Bejeweled is in the game division. If I select a different app from the list, it's telling me that Twitter is in the social media division, which it is. Okay, so just by combining those two, we've managed to get what we want. And that is why index and match are so powerful together. We're going to do it again. I realize this is complicated if it's the first time you're coming across it, but it took me a long time to learn how to do index and match together. So I don't expect you to understand this completely straight off the bat, but let's do it again because practice does make perfect. Let's do it for this one, profit. So we're going to do exactly the same thing, but obviously this time we're looking up the profit as opposed to the division. So we're going to say equals index. Remember that first array, what are you looking up? I'm looking up profit. So the array is going to be the profit, comma. What's the row number? Well, this is where we use that match command to automate finding that row number. So match, oops, help if I can spell. What are we looking up? We're looking up whatever's in H5. And we're looking for this app in the list of apps, comma. And we're doing an exact match again. I want it to exactly match whatever's in H5 to the list that I've selected. So we're doing a 0. And again, we need to close off the parentheses twice. And there we go. Let's do a visual check. So Doom, it's in the division game, and the profit for that game should be 469, which it is. Okay. How's that sitting with people? I know it's complicated. How are we going, guys? Let me just check in. All okay? David, great, lovely. Okay, better. So useful. I know it is. They're really useful functions, Nancy. They really are. And as I said, I understand that they are a little bit painful when you first see them. Someone said, is that just the data for Doom? No, I could toggle. So if I select something else, it will change that data. All right, so that's what makes it really quite nice and powerful. Now, I am going to show you one more, even more complicated, because I thought, why not? Hey, why not? Let's go one step further. You might as well have all the information, and then you can decide how complicated you want to go when you review this session. So this is going to be a little bit more complicated, and again, I can see that I need to clear some information. Just bear with me. There we go. All right. Now for this one, I've just got revenue here. So I could go in and do another index match and do pretty much the same as we've done these two in order to find the revenue. But I'm going to do this a slightly different way. What I want to do is I want to put revenue and profit in a little drop-down list. So much like we have all of the apps in a drop-down list, which we can toggle between, I want to have revenue and profit as a toggle here as well. And I'm going to do it pretty much the same way that we did this one. So I'm going to create a data validation list. So I'm going to go up to data validation. I'm going to select list. And my source, I want it to have revenue or profit. So I'm going to select revenue and profit from the table. And you can see there now I have a drop down and I can toggle between revenue and profit. Now that adds in a further complication, because now when we do the index match, the value here could either be revenue or profit, depending on which one I've selected. So we need to adjust our index match slightly in order to get this to work. So let's go back and do index, open bracket. Now our array, remember our array is what we're looking up. In the two previous examples, we were looking up division and then we were looking up profit. Now we could be looking up revenue, but we could also be looking up profit, because it depends what we select in that drop down. So our array is going to be both of these columns, because it could be either of them. Okay, so I'm going to select revenue and profit, comma, row number. Remember that match command has automated that row number process, so we want to go in there. Our lookup value is whatever is in H5, and we're looking up our app in the apps list, so we're going to select that as our lookup array, comma, and we're doing an exact match. I'm going to close my bracket. Now there's one, this is the additional thing that you need to do here. We need to add on to the end here another match. Why do we need to do that? Currently, we haven't told Excel to look up revenue and profit in this table. It doesn't know that these headings match what we have in here. So we then need to say match, this is the lookup value. And our lookup array are the two headings just here. And we want to do an exact match. So we need to add this extra part on the end, because we have this on a toggle. It needs to know which column you want it to return. Okay, and that's what this bit is doing on the end. And we need to do, how many close brackets do we need to do here? I've got two open. I think I need to do, oops, two. Hit enter. There we go. So let's do a quick check. So Instagram, it's in social media. It's a profit of 787. You can see here, this one isn't, we've got more decimal places here, which is why it's got 786. And then we've got the revenue here, which again, if we round these down, it would be 30,400. And I can toggle between the two. And I could do it from up here as well. All right, does that make sense to everyone? I know that's so complicated if this is the first time that you're seeing them, but it's a definite progression on from the basic VLOOKUPs, looking at both of those arguments, the true or false, into HLOOKUP, and then on to index and match. These take practice. As I said, I would go through this spreadsheet and try it yourself, and it will click eventually, but it does take work, particularly if you're new to them. So let me just double check in with you. Everybody okay so far? Hopefully you can still hear me with my horrible voice. I know I'm sounding awful at the moment. Lovely. All right, guys. Okay, that's pretty much what I wanted to show you. So we finished sort of 10 minutes ahead of time. So I'm going to open it up to questions. So I'm going to, just bear with me while I open up the questions panel. And I'll try and answer some of these. So let me see what we've got. Would we use true if the table was values? It depends what you're looking up. So if the table is values and you're looking up, I think I've got one just here, hang on. So if we go back to this one, so in this example I was looking up essentially a value, okay, in this catalog, which is also values. So it depends if you're looking for an exact match. So this part number, I wanted to exactly match the part number over here. So it doesn't really matter if it's values. It really depends if what you're looking up is going to match exactly, or if it's like in a range, like this example was where we used the true argument. Let's move down to the next question. So can you do a lookup to more than 2 tables or data ranges? What if you want to look up from 3 tables or data ranges. Let me think. Yes, in theory you could. I'm not sure whether you'd have to put them in different columns though. I'm not sure if you can look up values in more than one table in one function or one formula. I would have to look that up. I don't think you can do it in one formula. You might have to put them in separate columns, but I would have to look that up for you just to be doubly sure. Warren's got, does the common lookup value, e.g. the part number, always have to be to the far left of the table array? Yes, it does, Warren. So that is what I was saying. That is why you can use index match for lookups as well, because with VLOOKUPs, it always counts from the left essentially. So it has to be in the left, and what you're looking up has to be to the right of it. Let's go down. In average wage, tax, why did it look in B and not D? What are you talking about, this example here? Let's have a look. So we looked up the value in B12 here, so 55,000. It was looking in this table, and we wanted it to return this value here. So you're saying, why did it look in B? Why did it look in B and, sorry, I'm trying to understand what you've got here, B and not D. It will look in here, so it will look on the left-hand side. Okay, that's why it's pulling it back that way, because it goes from the left to the right. Andrew, data needs to be in the same workbook. Could you do the lookup from functions in different workbooks? Yes, you could. Yep, you would just have to have them both open, and it will create that link. So when you select the table or whatever it is in the other workbook, it will create that link for you in the function, in the formula, I should say. Can you name a lookup array? I'm not sure what you mean by that, Ian. Can you name, we've been naming the tables, which is essentially where you're looking up. You can name pretty much anything in Excel. You can name a cell if you wanted to. So if I click on a cell, I can go up here and give it a name. So yeah, in theory, you can name a lookup array if you wanted to. Wow, that is a very, very long question, Ulf. I don't know if I'm going to have time to answer all of that. What I might have to do is get back to you via email. If you can send that to me, because there's a lot of information in there, via email, that would be great. I'll give you my email address in a moment, but that is quite a long question for me to answer. What have we got here? Will we get a link to the recording? Yes, you will. As I said at the beginning, it goes out 48 hours after this webinar. Next question. Hi, for V or HLOOKUP, can you do a lookup to more than 2 tables or data ranges? Yeah, someone's already, I think that's the same question I answered before. I'm going to need to look that one up. I would say no at the moment. Can we practice these spreadsheets after the webinar? Yes, you can. I will be sending these spreadsheets out to you. Do revenue and profit have to be next to each other? So in the index match, are you talking about these columns here? No, not necessarily. If there was another, let's just say if we inserted something in here and you were trying to do this, you would just need to select that one, hold down your control key and select that one. They don't have to be next to each other, no. Instead of using 2 matches in your last example, can you use an array formula? Possibly. I'm not sure about that one without trying it. I don't know on that one, Kim. Give it a go. That's what I always say to people, give it a try. I wouldn't have thought so just by thinking of it off the top of my head, but I don't know. I've never tried to use an array formula instead of the final match, but you could give that a go and see. How soon will this be available as a video? 48 hours later, Tony, and it will be emailed out to you in a link. Jacqueline's put, can you go over the last formula? So you're talking about this index match one. Okay, let's go over that one more time. Do it from scratch. And let me remove the data validation and we'll do that again. Okay, so the first thing I did, I put this on a toggle. So we went to data validation, we selected list, And then I selected just the column headings that I want to be in that drop down. Then what we did was equals index. We're looking for the array, so it's going to be either the revenue or the profit in here. So we need to select, this is what I call the map. We need to select our little array map, comma. Row number, the match command automates that row number, and we're looking up the app, is our lookup value. We're looking up the app in the apps list, so that's our lookup array. And we want it to exactly match the word, in this case, office lens. And then because we have this on a toggle, we need to add a different match in here. So we need to say match. Our lookup value is what's in here. And this is our lookup array. We need to tell Excel to look up this in here, so it knows which column to return depending on which one you've selected. And we're doing an exact match, like so. And there we go. It's like magic, but complicated if you've never seen it before. With index match, if your data was in a table, would it still work? Yes, absolutely fine. So I could go in and I could put this data in a table. So I could go to home and do format as table, which will then put this data in a table, and you could utilize that in the formula. So yes, it would work. When you use if NA or if error, can the return text or cell be formatted? Color, all caps, bold, highlight. You could do that, but I'm just thinking if you could do that within the formula, you might have to use conditional formatting for that to highlight if you wanted to do that, I would say. I could take a couple more questions. Let's have a look. When using VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, do both tables have to be either vertical or horizontal, or can you have one table of each format? They would have to be the same, running the same way. You couldn't have one table that was vertical and the other one that was horizontal. You would have to, if you're going to use VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, it has to be one or the other. In your example with the range, is Excel using the range description column to find the low and high columns? So again, this is going back to here. I think it's looking in here, so the first one, because it works from left to right. How long will this recording be available? The recordings are uploaded to YouTube, so they're available forever. So what you'll get in the email from me is you'll get a link to this spreadsheet so you can practice, and you also get a link to our YouTube channel where we upload our recordings. So they'll be on there forever and you can review whenever you like. All right, I'm going to leave it there now because we are coming up towards the end. Thank you so much. There were so many questions. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question, and I'm so sorry for my croaky voice. I'm not feeling particularly great today, as you can probably tell, but hopefully we managed to get through VLOOKUPs and you've gone away with a little bit more of an understanding than what you did when you came in. Thank you so much for attending. Look out for that email, which will be coming into your email inboxes in 48 hours. Let me just type into the chat panel my email address. So for those of you who asked questions that I didn't get around to answering, then please feel free to send me, an email. Here it is in the chat panel, deborah.ashby@filtered.com. Tim's put red wine will ease your throat. That is a fabulous idea, Tim. I've had enough of honey and lemon. Maybe I should start on the red wine. Oh, thank you, Paul. Telling me I get better every time I do these. I hope so. It's quite hard when you've got a really fuzzy head, but hopefully it wasn't too bad. Thank you, guys. And I will speak to you next time. You've got, I think there's a webinar on PowerPoint next week, which Tess is running, and then I am back for Excel after that. So hopefully I will speak to you then. Thanks, guys. Bye. Guys, bye.